All right, so I first want to start by thanking you guys for your time, CFO, CEO. I know it's extremely valuable, and you can probably think of a million different things you can do to generate revenue, right? So in respect to that, I want to just kind of dive in, but before I do, I want to ask you guys a question, and I know this is the role play part that you guys said you're not going to do, but what strategies or initiatives have you guys taken, or have you guys implemented, that in your mind sets you apart from the competition, right? Okay, and so the reason I ask that question is because more often than not, the answer I get revolves around product, right? We have the best product. We have the best service. We have the best people. Some say they have a real strong capital structure, right? I never hear, and I could probably say never, maybe rarely one occasion I hear that it's because they have strong controls over their number one of their biggest expenses, right, which is people, right? I rarely hear that, and if I do hear that, I probably wouldn't be in that room either way, right? And so I asked that question, right, to, you know, if you were to ask me today what I think puts you guys ahead of the competition is the fact that you guys are sitting here in this room with me, having a conversation with an open mind, with the possibility of challenging your business and the way you do it, challenging the processes you have in place, right? For ADP, I meet with companies that are 50 to 1,000 employees, right? That's the range that I meet with. I see the guts of these companies. The good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly. It may not mean much to you, but what I tend to see is that most of the companies I deal with are either in a growth mode, right? They are trying to establish themselves as an industry leader. They're looking to maybe expand, right? Some are mature, and some are maybe implementing an exit strategy, right? They want to look attractive. They want to make sure everything's tied so they can get bought out, right? This is the range of where I see some of the companies I work with. Now, what I also see is that 95% of the companies I typically talk to are in this quadrant, and which is what I consider one of the most critical quadrants to be in when you're making decisions based on human resources. There's a reason for that. When you're down here, you're a startup, you've got an idea, right? That's all it is. You're looking for funding, then you got a product, right? And when you get to the point where the product takes off, you start to enter this quadrant. There's a shift that happens, right? It becomes more about, not so much about the product or service you offer, it becomes more about how you run your business and how efficient it is, right? Let's take ADP for example. 60 years we've been processing payroll. We were first to market with it. 60 years later, how many competitors do we have? God knows how many, right? There's so many of us out there. Now, I stand behind our products and services, right? I think we're still best in class. But I don't know if that's the reason why we're one of 4 AAA rated companies, right? Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and Exxon, right? I don't know if that's why 90% of Fortune 500 companies use us. If that's the reason why, because of our product per se, right? So what happens is that this shift happens and you start to enter a different mindset, right? You start to have to deal with more people because you're growing, because you have to create the best business possible in the most efficient way possible, right? And in this quadrant, you start to have to think a little more strategic, right? So you think about strategy, right? You want to have the best talent, right? You want to have the best training in place for your talent. You want to have a competitive compensation strategy, right? To retain your talent, right? You want to have succession planning so the business can be viable in the future. All of this, right, becomes why you're in business, right? So that's the shift that happens in this quadrant. And the other side to this is what CFOs and CEOs don't really like to talk about, right? The tactical part. Basically, the reasons that you have to worry about because you're in business, right? You have to pay your taxes, right? You have to worry about benefit administration. You have to worry about COBRA, direct deposit, 401k. You have to worry about everything that goes into managing the people that you have grown into, right? And so this is where I see some of the companies struggle that I talk to, because they can't figure out whether they want to do strategic or they want to be more tactical. But regardless of what it is, ADP is there to help them, right? Because if you decide to be more strategic and you want to have 10% to 20% focus on that, and 80 to 90% focus on the tactical part, that's fine, right? But how do you know that this is the best way possible to do it if you've never benchmarked yourself, right? There's companies that want to be more strategic, so it's vice versa, and they want to get out of the business of having to deal with the noise, right, and quieting it. So they look at ADP as an option to see if that makes sense, right? So what I challenge and what I propose and what we want to do is come in here and figure out, how much are your 401k fees? How long is it taking for payroll to get processed? Where are the profit leaks? How much is it costing you to take care of your non-core business items, right? And I want to compare it to what ADP can do at a cost that we can do it for. That's what we propose. The reality is we don't always win, right? But when we do win, we know that there's a direct correlation to the income statement. Because we know that when change is enacted here, we are going to directly affect your cost of goods sold, right? We're going to directly affect your operating expenses. We're going to directly affect your EBITDA, right? And we know that if whatever this number is, we move this even 0.5%, right? We know that your business can be running as efficiently as possible. And that's going to affect this ultimately, and eventually this. Because we are giving you more time to focus on revenue generating activities.